Okay. All right. Hey, JD, how you doing? Good morning on this Sunday, the 5th of September. 5th of September, right?
It is 5th of September. I'm happy that the weather has finally changed. Unfortunately, we have a hurricane to thank for that, but everything's turning up roses right now. Election campaigning is going well, and yeah, all good here.
Okay. What do you think about early voting? That we're this year's a change, and it's a new sort of paradigm. I have to buy my buddies a beer if I say the word paradigm more than once. I've already said it twice, so I have to buy them all a beer. But what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's I think it's always great to give the voters as much of a chance as possible to get to the polls and to make sure that they have an opportunity to do that. I think that of course COVID-19 and the pandemic have pressurized the election system, so we need to find creative ways to get people to the polls and make sure people are participating in our democracy. Of course, we need to be careful that everybody who's voting is the person they say they are, and that we're making sure that that is clear and clean. But that seems to be all in place, at least in my district, and I'm pretty happy about it. For a candidate, it makes life a little bit complicated. Of course, you've got not just a November 2nd target date for all of your campaigning, but you've got essentially a rolling election date from September 17th all the way through November 2nd. And so, there's no downtime for a candidate. You're just constantly on, and it can be a little fatiguing.
Yeah, so I got a phone call about a week and a half ago from Glenn Youngkin, thanking me for the stuff that we're doing and to getting you guys out there in front of the voting population, possible constituencies, and then also sort of reinforcing the concept of early voting and how important it is. It's not something that we're used to, but it's something we must take advantage of. It happens to be the sort of saline content in the water that we're swimming in right now. So, early voting. Anybody's watching this, early vote, vote early, and submit your application to do that. You probably have something that's already reached you in the mail by now. Today is, like I said before, I think 5 September 2021. My name is Matt Daniel. I'm the chairman of the Spirit of VMI Political Action Committee. We're a 527 PAC, not a 501c3, not for profit. We donate and support political candidates that we think will do the best job of standing watch over VMI in stopping or preventing harmful legislation when it comes to VMI. And that's our job. That's our sole job, is to do that sort of thing. We've done interviews already and have them lined up with Mark Early from the 68th, Gina Ciarcia from the 2nd, Mary Margaret Castleberg from the 73rd, Tim Anderson, 83rd, Mike Cherry, a critical race from the 66th. We have Tara Durant, 28th, and we've done Glenn Davis from the 84th, and we'll do Ronnie Campbell as well. Today, we have JD Maddox in the Alexandria area. JD, I'm going to ask you to talk about your district real quickly here, but the 45th House of Delegates district in Virginia, JD Maddox. So can you describe that district?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm running for delegate here in the state of Virginia in the 45th district, which is Eastern Alexandria, most of Old Town Alexandria, as well as a small portion of Southern Arlington and Northern Fairfax. So it's one of those strangely shaped districts that we're all faced with, and that may change here soon. But in any case, it's a rather affluent district, and the people who live here often work in DC and are some of our nation's foremost experts on national security policy and other federal policy. And so it's an absolutely fantastic place to live. It's steeped in history. George Washington lived right down the road at Mount Vernon, of course, and he actually was one of the guys who built my house back in 1790. So we feel that every day. And it's also an incredibly diverse community, and we love that. We love the diversity of people here. We love the diversity of opportunities here, and we're just we're thrilled to have lived here for about 20 years. We love the place, and I'm running because I see that a few things are not being run well, and they haven't been for some years, and they're failing as a result of that. And we're trying to get those back into shape And by doing these pragmatic things, such as fixing sewers and fixing IT systems and fixing school systems and road systems, I really want to demonstrate to people that there's a way to do this very fairly. There's a way to do this talking with everybody in the community, not just one side or the other, not just one political group or the other, but really bringing the whole community back together and making sure that we have a sense of real community and we're not polarized. I think that's the real trouble of our times, is that everybody feels like they're in one camp or another. And we've got to get past that. We've got to get back to the center. We've got to show people that there's a third way to do things.
Great answer, and that actually took one of the questions off the sheet that I had, so we can move the ball forward on that. So thank you. It was bridging the political divide was a question. So your district, does it include Delray and Russell Road as it runs from King Street into Arlington?
That's right. So it's Delray is part of the district. Shirlington is part of this district. Old Town Alexandria, Huntington down in Fairfax County, and then Arlington, part of Arlington, the 23rd Street corridor, which runs into Crystal City. It's all part of the 45th district.
Okay, West Potomac High School down there in Fort Hunt area?
No, that's outside. We have one high school here, which is formerly TC Williams, now Alexandria City High School.
Oh, they changed the name. Okay, so it's no longer TC Williams. I had a question about that. As a matter of fact, we'll jump right into that. With regard to public safety, I'd seen that there has been some reduction or an attempt to reduce law enforcement that support work at TC Williams and broadly in Alexandria. You want to talk about that, about public safety as a stance that you may have?
I think this is really one of the top three issues that we're facing right now. I think that the political party that has been in place here for years, uncontested, really feels that it's in a position where it can do just about anything unopposed, without any pushback from the right. And as a result, they've really done some unusual, you could even say bizarre things recently. So in this community in Alexandria City, especially, there's been a 20% increase in violent crime over the last year. And at the same time, the police are among the worst paid in the region. And so we see this misbalance of priorities from our politicians here. But, very acutely, what we've seen here as a real indicator of their position on things is that very recently, my opponent in this race actually cast the deciding vote to remove school police officers from the public schools here. And that comes during a time when there have been over 100 cases of grand larceny, over 100 cases of assault, and one reported rape in one school over a 930-day period. And so the decision to remove those police really does not jibe with reality. And I look at this from the position of a former CIA branch chief. I focused on terrorism for a very long time, and I have a really good understanding for where violence comes from, how it erupts in communities, and how it's controlled. And you don't control it by removing police. And their idea was to remove those police officers and replace them with therapists. And again, I find that a little disingenuous. I think that there are political motives behind it and ideological motives behind it that really don't sync with reality.
So your opponent, if I get this right, if I've done my research right, is Elizabeth Bennett Parker, right? She's the vice mayor of Alexandria, if that's correct.
That's right.
Yeah. And so she actually voted to reduce the police effort and presence in a school, basically the safety mechanisms within a school.
Yeah, so we're currently at a national level enduring this crisis of school shootings and mass shootings, and they voted just a few months ago to remove the funding for these police and to position that funding for therapists in the school. So it's really coming at a bizarre time, and it has to be politically motivated. There can be no other reasoning for it. because you simply don't remove your security control in a situation where there's a known active cases going in the community.
So while we're talking about school and public safety, I mean, I think we get the idea that you support funding, fully funding police, and I'm sure accountability. You would, like any sane person, I would imagine, support accountability measures to make sure police are, like anybody else, is held accountable for their actions. But we were talking specifically about in the schools. Education. How is education, public education, in your district?
Just before we jump to education, I do want to answer that, I think it's absolutely critical that we acknowledge the problem that we're all facing, which is that there's this sense, especially among the African-American community and communities of color, that they are not being served by the police in the same way that the white population is. And we can't just talk around that. We really do have to address it. We have to go after it. We have to make sure that it's addressed. But at the same time, we can't give up on our police. We can't put all the blame on the police. We have to support them politically. We have to support them financially. And we have to make sure they have the right kind of training, because a lot of this comes down to tactics and how they're carrying out their work. And so if we can position them better with training and position them better in the community, we can really move this effort forward. You can really shift the narrative that's happening right now. So I'm really concerned about that. I want to make sure that people who are listening and watching understand that we have to acknowledge this deeper problem, but we also have to be very pragmatic about how we're going about the business of securing our communities.
Yeah, it's a national bellwether issue, and I'm sorry I interrupted you as you were addressing.
No, that's okay. I was just going to talk a little bit about education. I think that yes, they go hand in hand, but the education problem is even more complex. So here in Alexandria, Fairfax, and Arlington, we experienced a real failure of the school systems over the past year. So the school leadership made a decision to close during the pandemic, and I think that made good sense at the beginning. They were trying to confront a problem that they didn't have the resources to confront otherwise. And but that situation progressed, and they had an opportunity to reopen in February. There was actually a vote at the state level, but the incumbent in this position actually voted against reopening, and the local leadership did absolutely nothing to try to help the schools and get them reopened and get them functioning appropriately. At the same time, we could see, private school kids were all going to school. School was wide open for them in person, and they were getting a great education. So what I'm seeing in this community is that, there's this new distinction between private school education and public school education that was not there before. Public school education has always gotten, a bad rap. People have always said that you can get a better education in private school. But now what we're seeing is that Virginia's SOL scores have come out in the last week, and those are the standards for learning school scores at the state level, and they're indicating that there was a drop from, I think it was 81% math pass rates to 54%, and similar drops for science. That's the best, clearest indicator to me that what was going on over the last year was catastrophic. It did not help things at all. And the leadership could have done much more to keep good education going. I think the teachers suffered as a result of it. The students suffered terribly as a result of it. My own kids were in public school and have been for their entire lives. And they would cry at their computers at night, literally, because they were so upset by this sense of loneliness and this sense of not doing the education that their family had come to expect of them, not participating in an education system that we'd come to expect of them. And it really was a terrible year for everyone. And my family is not suffering. We're a well-to-do family here in Alexandria, Virginia. There are people who were, families were working two jobs out of the house in service industry or elsewhere, and they didn't have the advantages that we have. They weren't able to stay at home and help their kids out and help that education along. So in addition to this terrible education standards, we also had the inability of some of these kids to actually get to school or to participate in education. And then there's also the case of kids with special needs who were essentially pushed out of the system over the last year and could not get any education. And so, all of these factors are coming to play. And at the same time, we have a political leadership here that is really starting to conflate their own failed policies on education with equity issues. And I find that to be a really toxic narrative. I think that it's all heading in the wrong direction. If you start connecting educational standards to equity standards, you've got an inherent miscommunication that's about to happen. And I think that's coming about. You see it in Loudoun County, parents going to the school boards and essentially protesting and rioting. And I think there's great risk for that happening much more broadly in Virginia.
So those numbers, those math numbers you gave, the 80th percentile down to the 50th percentile area, is that those are state of Virginia numbers? What about the Alexandria City Schools?
I think we fared a little bit better in Alexandria, but not by much. To have a essentially 50% pass rate on standards that are low anyway is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It does not jive with anything good for Virginia.
Yeah, we're seeing after doing these interviews and doing a little bit of research that the standards are the recommended standards are actually being lowered for math proficiency and across the board, just across the board. And so, it's very concerning. We're getting at the DNA, the molecular level of where we're going as a country, as a state, and then I'm sure in your district too. So it's very concerning, and it's not surprising that this is either number one or number two on most of the candidates list of things to talk about. So another thing, we probably exhausted that for now anyway, although I think we could probably talk for hours on that. The economy and well, let's talk about right to work and its application there within your district, and maybe give a quick primer on right to work, what happened in 2020, I think, as far as the legislation that was proposed and why we need to defeat that, if you believe that.
Well, I think that, right to work has been around for a long time. The argument against it is that it's somehow racist, which I don't quite understand, to be honest. The argument for it simply is that if you have right to work, it means that you do not have to join a union. You have the option of opting out of unionization. So by getting rid of right to work, essentially what's happening is you have forced collectivization or forced unionization of everybody who's on the payroll. And to me, that is unfair to the worker. It's also unfair to businesses. And I don't think it's a way that businesses want to function in Virginia. I don't think it's good for their bottom line, but I also don't think it's good for personal freedoms of the individual.
Yeah, so that I believe that legislation was proposed by, I guess, still current Delegate Lee Carter from, I think, your district, I believe, and Senator Saslaw, just to get those guys on the record of people that are trying to take away the right to work and force the requirement to join unions, basically pay to get a job.
Yeah, I think, we're seeing it play out at the local level as well. So at the city level, municipal level, a number of cities have moved forward with collectivization or collective bargaining. And, what we've seen is that, as soon as those new rules come out or are put in place, we see the study that indicates the incredible cost of doing that. So here in Alexandria, the estimate of one independent research organization is that it would cost about $25 million for the city to shift over to collective bargaining. And I don't think the city has thought through that cost, but they're gleeful to have moved to our collective bargaining. And it's really part of, I think it's part of this viewpoint from the far left within the Democratic Party about collectivization and about guaranteed basic income and other efforts like that are really shifting the party toward a more socialist viewpoint than it ever has been.
I spent a lot of time, thank you for that answer. I spent a lot of time up in Northern Virginia, probably within your district, staying. I work at Quantico, doing some stuff and in the Pentagon sometimes, and spend my nights during the week generally in places down in Alexandria and down further south. But when I'm in Alexandria, I generally take a walk and go down King Street. Over the last year or year and a half or so, it's gotten better. It's gotten better, but walking down King Street had been a pretty depressing evolution, as it looked like a Halloween pumpkin smile. What's that? The jack-o'-lantern smile with teeth knocked out. Stores darkened and banners closed. I think that's gotten better again. But this is all leading to small business in your district. Can you tell me about that and what the initiatives that you might put in to help small businesses? Yeah,
so I think you did experience something that others have experienced, and you can still go see that sort of jack-o'-lantern look up on the 500 block of King. There are still lots of vacant stores there. I think everybody suffered because of COVID, and of course, retail suffered tremendously. And retail is suffering anyway as a result of the move over to internet-based retail. But there were opportunities along the way to help those organizations out. What we're seeing now, I think, is that people who otherwise would have been in retail positions or service positions in restaurants and otherwise, a lot of them have been the recipients of benefits from the federal government and others that have essentially replaced the kind of income that they could have gotten at retail and restaurant jobs. And so a lot of these a new restaurant coming online right now, or a new bar coming online right now, is really having a hard time finding the people it needs to fill those jobs. And as long as those benefits continue, those organizations will really have a hard time with that. So I think we're going to have a really hard decision here very soon, and I know the Biden administration is grappling with it right now over when to stop job benefits, when to stop the eviction moratoria. All those issues are coming around right now. I think that it is pretty dangerous to constantly prop up an economy. I think you have to get back to fundamentals and get back to a place where the economy is healthfully running itself. You can't just constantly push out benefits and hope that the system will result in a success. It just doesn't work that way.
I would think that the one extreme way of looking at it is just ripping off the bandage. I think that there's probably an educated, intelligent way to take the bandage off while also making sure that it actually comes off.
Right. Yeah. I think that, we can't put people out on the streets, can't kick people out on the streets, can't make them jobless. None of those things are useful. You got to have transition programs. You got to have ways to keep people, in their homes, for example, through rent relief and other programs. Nobody wants anybody to suffer as a result of the end of these programs, but we've got to tail them off, and we got to get back to a healthy economy.
Okay, we'll close up here in just a minute. Quickly about voter integrity, since the election's coming up in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks when it comes to early voting anyway. And so it's a big topic these days. Do you think that it's based in race and discrimination? Or what's your idea about the ID requirements for voter?
Well, I think, over the last few years, the voter ID requirement has changed, of course, and the current requirement is for, very simple paperwork to identify yourself. You can go to the polls here with a utility bill or other, bill that has your home address on it as a form of ID. I don't find that very convincing as a form of ID. And, the old standard was simply a state issued ID, like your driver's license. And I thought that was convenient enough for all the voters. And we have spoken with the election folks here, and to try to understand, what is the disadvantage to the voter in this case? Why are we shifting over, and what's the reality here? And the reality from both sides is that there has been no discrimination based on identification requirements, whether it was state issued IDs like your driver's license or otherwise. And everybody who is working the polls wants you to vote, like they want you to come in and vote, and they're going to try to help that along no matter who you're voting for. And I think the risk right now is that there's this terrible narrative ongoing about the elections being rigged and voter ID being rigged and people coming in from everywhere to vote in any election. I want to make sure that it's clear that I certainly have the sense that the voting here is very fair, it's very secure. I do think it could be more secure. I think IDs, state issued IDs, it's not a huge burden for the voter, and I think it's very useful.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. You have a history in federal service, and I do too. Have you spoken or connected with veterans in your area? Is there anything you want that's worth sharing about that?
Yep, I'm a former U.S. Army Special Operations soldier and a former CIA branch chief, and I've worked in a number of other three-letter agencies. I have a strong connection with the veterans community here. I was endorsed by American Veterans Vote. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of my service. I'm also very proud of the service of the others who are around me. And I see that the sacrifices that veterans have made really do deserve our praise and our honor. And I would like to see more programs applied to help veterans along, especially as they're transitioning out of the service and into commercial or private industry. And I think there are ways to do that, of course, through training, which is already happening in the services as officers and enlisted are leaving. But also, within the state, I would like to see more tax advantages for veterans. I'd like to see that tax burden drop for them. I think that would be very healthy, and that would help them along as they're trying to negotiate a new civilian life.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And we try to, as much as we can, relate to and hold hands with the veterans associations that are out there and different political action mechanisms that we have. So it's good to hear that you've gotten that endorsement. I'm going to move to VMI real quick, a cluster of comments, and just maybe I know that you're a son of a VMI graduate, class of 1960. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Right. So you're obviously familiar with the sort of unique characteristics of VMI. I always smile when I say that because VMI is kind of weird. It does things kind of weird, but it's been hugely successful in what it's been doing, and it's been under fire, from basically your local newspaper up there, and that's carried through many media sources. I'd go so far as to say something that would maybe relate to you in your federal service anyway, as a disinformation campaign. Now, VMI, as it is, it has a proven value. I'll list some stats here in a second, but through its time-tested and honored systems and processes, the honor system at VMI is unmatched anywhere in the country and maybe in the world. I'm not sure. I haven't tracked what the global honor system stats and capabilities are, but its class system It's a cadet regimental system, so cadet leadership system. It's disciplinary system. Sounds harsh, must be, because it's necessary to to hold people accountable. And then it's top-notch educational system that to date has been pretty responsible in the way that it educates its men and women cadets. VMI's net present value is #2 in the state, only behind W&L, and W&L is #2 in the nation, only behind Stanford. So, basically it says, what is the value of your diploma? I think that was a 2019 report by US News and World Report, I believe. Job placement of VMI graduates is over 98%. So over 98% of cadets in their senior year at VMI have a job before they leave, and a job that is a high earning job as well. Underrepresented population at VMI. So that includes minorities, includes older cadets who come in at older than 25. It includes people from populations across the state and the nation that generally come from areas that don't have college graduates. It includes people who have received Pell Grant money within the last 5 years. But that number is over 35% at VMI, and it climbs every year. So VMI is fair, and VMI really makes an effort to reach out to bring in diverse, not just color diverse, but people diverse across all socioeconomic backgrounds as well. It's #1 in the nation for promotion of public service, as I think Money Magazine, or maybe that was Wall Street Journal. And the rankings, just there's myriad and too many to talk about, rankings of small colleges and the performance of graduates from small colleges, from as listed through the Wall Street Journal, Forbes magazine, Money Magazine, and more. So all that being said, and I'm sorry, it was a big old mouthful. Do you have a sense that that VMI, if you're elected and you swear the oath of office for delegate of Virginia from the 45th, would you support and defend VMI when it comes to appropriations and other things that may help and/or against those things that may harm VMI? Whew, sorry.
Great list. Appreciate it. So, you're right. My father's an alumnus, General Maddox, back in 1960. The family legend is that I was enrolled at VMI at birth, but I can't prove it. And for whatever reason, I ended up going to a very liberal, great books college in Maryland. Apologies to everyone who's listening about that, but sometimes I sit up at night and I regret I didn't go to VMI. But I'm a huge supporter of VMI. I think that all of the effort and strength that's put into character building at VMI is absolutely essential to turning out really useful citizens in the United States. And when I look at VMI and I look through, on your list, you did not include Medal of Honor recipients. And to me, that's a huge distinction for VMI. So VMI is not just educating people and not just building character into people, but it's turning out people who are truly dedicated to the future of the United States and representing our country very well. And I think one of the greatest ways that they do that, or have demonstrated that, is by winning those medals of honor. I mean, it's extraordinary. People putting country before self, putting their buddies before self. That is a clear indicator that VMI's mission statement is being carried out appropriately. In addition to all the great stats that you put out there, all of the Pell Grant winners and other scholarship winners, and the great job placement rates, it's all fantastic. And I think that the movement to the military among many of the VMI grads is fantastic.
Pretty significant misinformation campaign as embraced, or maybe and endorsed, and maybe even catalyzed, if that's a word, by the government in Richmond, by the governor's mansion, which is ironic, due to who he is and when he graduated from VMI, 1981, to the paper in Washington. I try not to say the name of the paper, but it also is cascaded across media, across not only the state, but the nation.
You know, to start, you know, I have absolutely no tolerance for racism, sexism, any of those that were pointed out in Ian Shapira's article. And I think that neither does VMI and neither does the military, which, you know, I always associate with VMI. And, you know, the military, of course, was one of the first organizations in the US to truly integrate. And, you know, when you look at the military, you see that there is a very strong effort to ensure that everyone is treated equally. And, you know, having served in the military myself, I see green, right? That's the way we look at the world. You know, it translates, for those who aren't aware, that, you know, we see a uniform, which is green. We don't see the color of people's skin. We're really looking to people as individuals and trying to find the best qualities in those individuals and bring them into the group so that we can succeed at what we're trying to do. I think that the process that was used by the governor, by others who are involved in this sort of campaign against VMI was an absolute travesty. I think, you know, one of the worst indicators of that misused process was when General Benny P essentially was forced to resign even before any sort of investigation had occurred at VMI. And to me, that's absolutely sad. It indicates to others at VMI, but also more broadly within the state of Virginia, that you know, leadership can be a political pawn, and that our political leaders are willing to play that kind of game. And I think that's terrible.
Well, I thank you for all those comments and concur with you. And I know that I'm breaking into your Sunday, you know, getting closer to afternoon time. So I'm going to let you go. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. We're going to publish this and get it out to as many people. And I encourage you to do the same thing if you would. But before I do that, I'd like to let you know that we go through candidates to show support for those who will support VMI. The beginning of the interview here was to ensure that people who would vote for you in your district know what you stand for, because the people we endorse, we want to win. Otherwise, it's, you know, it's a fool's errand. So I feel very comfortable in representing the spirit of VMI and the executive committee that supports us, that we would endorse actively and officially announce endorsement for J.D. Maddox and the Virginia House of Delegates, 45th District in Alexandria. Thank you for what you're doing, and we support you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I appreciate the endorsement, of course, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. These are sometimes heady issues and difficult to work through. And I just want to emphasize again that, you know, it's not about party. It's not about political spectrum. You know, which side of the political spectrum you're on. We've got to find a new way to talk about these issues. We've got to find a new way to do it in a healthy way. And we got to bring people back together and bring them back to back to the center. So I appreciate the opportunity to sort of walk through some of those issues and walk through the approach.
We like to say VMI is good. There's one candidate, Tim Anderson from the 83rd, I think, who said you ought to change that to thank God for VMI. We have had people tell us VMI is great. Can you say one of those things for me to get you on saying that so that we know where you stand?
I like VMI is great. That's good. That's good by me.
Okay. Hey, JD, it was great talking with you.